Hello, property navigators. Today we're going to talk about dual income rental properties. Now, this is a hot topic right now with so many people talking about attaining a passive income through property, and additionally for those investors that desperately need more cash flow to service their loans in the current interest rate environment. So what is dual income? Quite simply, one property, two incomes. Dual income properties provide two separate self-contained dwellings, usually on one block of land, giving an investor two streams of rent from separate tenancies. It may be a house with a granny flat, a duplex, dual occupancy, shop top housing, or a dual key property. Dual income investment properties can provide investors with higher rental yields as two separate incomes are produced. They also enable investors to minimize risk through improved cash flow and can provide a buffer against property vacancy rates as a result of multiple tenancies and therefore multiple income streams. Having one lot of land that produces two incomes through dual occupancy is a great way to double rental returns, maximizing your ROI. Whether the dual occupancy dwellings are adjoined or detached, the extra income can still be generated. Some investors choose to live in one of the homes while renting out the other, allowing them to pay off the mortgage sooner. If not, they can choose to rent out both dwellings for double the income. By taking on a dual income strategy for your portfolio, a greater area of the block of land will be used to the investor's advantage, maximizing your return on the asset. This can assist investors to increase their portfolio size without the same costs associated with the purchase of two separate investment properties, while providing the higher cash flow to service the loans. Let's get into some property-specific examples. We'll start with dual living properties. Now, these may look like one house on the outside, but they are actually two rentals on the inside. For example, you might see a Queenslander, or any double-story house for that matter, from the street front presents as a single quality residential home. It's when you look on the inside at the floor plan that the design becomes clear. What appears to be one dwelling on the outside is in fact two dwellings on the inside, producing two incomes. One way to do this we often see here in Queensland is by having one self-contained livable dwelling on the upper level and another self-contained dwelling taking up the lower floor. You may have a 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom premise on each level that are not accessible to one another. The backyard would typically be also divided for both tenancies to enjoy their own space. Now, people can manage this kind of conversion themselves quite simply, and many investors do. But remember, you shouldn't just be converting your garage or your garden shed into a second livable space, as you just won't get a good return. And you must meet council codes in order for the space to be legal. Whichever way you go about this, you need to understand the product you are delivering and ask yourself, does it match what is considered desirable in that specific location? In some markets, this kind of asset conversion is very desirable upon resale, and in other markets, they may not be as desirable. If you were to complete this type of conversion yourself, it might be worthwhile to put some plans in place to allow the property to be converted back if or when the property is poised to be sold. Next up, and probably the most popular dual income strategy, is the granny flat. The beauty of granny flats is the potential for relatively low construction costs. A flat pack 60 square metre kit can come with a price tag of as low as $50,000, according to some retailers, but this doesn't include the costs of labour to put it all together, or the cement slab, or the services like electricity or plumbing, and it surely doesn't include the approval process through council. So for a one-bedder, a more accurate cost is to budget about $120,000 for the prefab option. But this really isn't that desirable of a product in a lot of areas. So a more realistic cost, as per the contractor we use for our clients, is around the $200,000 mark. And this is for a ground-up build for a 2-bedroom granny flat, fully completed, including all the approvals, the concrete slab, and all the connection to services. Despite their small size, granny flats can punch well above their weight when it comes to returns. Say for instance, you were to spend $200,000 on your granny flat and you rent it out for $450 per week. That's nearly a 12% yield. So cash flow wise, they can make a lot of sense. Plus, as it's a new build, you would receive a depreciation on that too, giving you additional tax benefits. On the flip side, minimum block sizes can apply to build a granny flat. And in many cases, you'll need a block of at least 450 to 600 square meters, if not larger. The good news is that CoreLogic reports that an estimated 500,000 homeowners across Australia's eastern seaboard have sufficient backyard space for a granny flat. Now, whilst many properties may have granny flat potential, they may not offer the best outcome. So drivable side access to the granny flat is preferred, such as side access to the backyard where the granny flat will be, so the tenants can actually drive up to their property. But many investors create granny flats with only walkable side access, usually from the front of the property. So seek guidance from a local property manager, as they'll be able to give you advice about what would be attractive to tenants in the area. A major pitfall if you plan to rent out a granny flat located in your backyard is navigating the red tape involved with building it and legally renting it out. So check with your local council to find out what rules apply in your area and the zoning that is required to do it all the right and legal way. Next up, we have duplexes. A duplex is a residential building containing two homes that share normally a common wall in the middle. A duplex looks like two houses side by side, sharing the same roof, and can be a mirror image of one another. Because there's two separate entrances, the style of build provides homeowners with dual occupancy, providing two income opportunities as a landlord or the chance to have family or your kids live next door. Best of all, they can be cheaper per side to build than a standard home. Duplexes can both be on one title, but you will generally have an option that allows you to divide the block into two titles, so one for each property, meaning you'll have two separate properties. This means that a duplex can help owners unlock hidden equity in their property by changing their single property into two by subdividing the block at a later date, with the option to sell both dwellings separately, sell just one and live in the other, or to rent one, or keep both and rent both properties out. You can really do whatever you want. Next up, we have dual key properties. Now, a dual key property is as shown on screen. Effectively, it is one main property divided into two dwellings, but instead of two exactly mirrored dwellings like a duplex, it's usually a house on one side with a unit on the other. You can see what I mean by the image on screen. Now, this is mainly built in Queensland. While dual occupancy properties look similar to duplex developments, these are completely different assets, as dual occupancy homes are on one formal title as opposed to two titles with separate utilities, and they can rarely be subdivided, so they must be sold jointly when you do decide to sell. They are kind of the poorer cousin to the duplex, and as they are generally built new, from an investment standpoint, we believe there are much better options available. And lastly, we have shop top housing. Now, this isn't really where a lot of investors play, but it is a dual income strategy, so we'll cover it briefly anyway. A shop top property is where a residential dwelling occupies the same lot as a commercial premise, such as an apartment above a shop. Shop top housing can be a way for investors to diversify across residential and commercial property markets via one single property. But there can also be issues associated with shop top housing. Whether shop top properties are available in your area will likely depend on your council. And while some governments encourage this type of property as a means of rejuvenating town centres, tough restrictions can apply to car parking requirements as well as fire and accessibility standards. Perhaps the biggest risk of shop top housing is that commercial properties tend to experience longer rental vacancy periods than those typically experienced for residential properties. Now, this could leave the apartment component of the property doing the heavy lifting for you to maintain your cash flow. You should know about investing in commercial properties before ever dipping your toe in. So how do these dual income strategies compare to subdividing, and when or why would you choose to subdivide instead? So the question often gets asked, which development type should I go for? Granny flat, dual occupancy, subdivision, which one do we go for? Well, on screen is a suitable block with an existing home that you could use for either purpose. So you're thinking, all right, do I subdivide my land or do I have a dual occupancy? The benefit of dual occupancy is obviously extra income. If you're going to do the subdivision, then the reason you'd be looking at that is probably to release some equity to be able to sell off half of it or all of it and then go on to the next project. So the question should actually be, why am I buying that asset as opposed to what can I do? Remember, always start with strategy. There are some fundamental differences between the both. With subdivision, you're looking at equity release, you're looking at return on investment from the sale. Dual occupancy, you're looking for the return on investment from the rental income. If you just subdivide and split the block, you can sell off the second lot of land with or without a property being built and then use the money to pay off your mortgage or to reinvest. Dual occupancy is good if you can build a dwelling for a good price and then rent it out, reaching a good yield, much like the example I used when I first spoke about granny flats. It can really increase your cash flow, and you can also work to increase your overall equity, which you can then draw out to reinvest over the long term. If you have the borrowing capacity to create a dual occupancy such as a small house build, you might want to ask yourself, why not subdivide and ultimately have two separate income producing properties on individual titles? So 2 properties. Now, this allows you immediate options to sell one if you ever need to. The largest cost is building the second dwelling, and by subdividing, you are giving yourself more potential options in the short term if you need them. And although we're talking about subdivision here, it's important to point out that a lot of investors buy property with what is called subdivision potential. Now, this allows investors to buy a property that they don't need to subdivide or make dual income right now upon purchase, but keeps their options open to do whatever they choose to in the future. For a property to have subdivision potential, you must ensure that when you purchase an investment property, it has some very key and important features, such as the zoning of the block allows for subdivision, or in the future it may, and the block is a minimum 600 to 800 square meters dependent on the council, if not more. Well, there we go, property navigators. Well, if you liked this video and all the information in it, you should check out this video here, because there's a lot of investors doing a lot of things that are costing a lot of money that just doesn't need to. Until next time, happy property navigating.